Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to this online platform. So, in the last lecture we discussed about the typology of goods in the context of commons and collective action problems. Today we will be discussing about some recalls that we have already discussed in the last class. So, the contents would be broadly recapitulations of previous lessons along with some of these seminal theories on the collective actions. So, in seminal theories, as we have already understood that, we will be talking about three theories. The first one is the Garrett Hardin's tragedy of the commons. So, today we will be discussing this thesis of the tragedy of the commons itself. So, if you analyze and recall the last lecture that we are talking about, it is about the typologies of the goods. So, there we talked about, we started with the typologies of the goods and discussed Samuelson's twofold classification of the goods, that is public goods and the private goods, which he talked in his article, that is Pure Theory of Public Expenditure in 1954. So, along with that, along with this twofold classification of the good, that is public good as well as private good, we also added another type of goods in this category in this classification, that is named as club good. So, if you see this club good classifications, the credit goes to Buchanan, which he talked about this good in his An Economic Theory of Clubs in 1965. But however, if you see the another category of the goods, that is collectives or commons, so it has its traditions and its conceptions are found in the philosophical literature in the writings of the Plato, Aristotle, John Locke, Rousseau, David Hume, Adam Smith as well as John Rawls. So, in economic literature, this concept of the common goods, commons or collective goods is pertinent to the subfield of economics, that is welfare economics. So, moreover you can say that if you want to see the development of this concept commons, that is also his application in the subfields like environmental economics and ecological economics as well. And then we talked about the attributes of non-excludability and non-rivalness by taking into account the terms by R. A. Musgrave's contributions of these two attributes to classify different typologies of the goods. By then along with this, then we need to talk about the modification to the classification of the goods by these two authors. The first one is Vincent Ostrom and the second one is Elinor Ostrom. So, what are the modifications? So, we talked about the public goods, we talked about private goods, and the third one we talked about is the club goods, which was contributed in the theory of Buchanan's theory in 65. So, what is the modification they proposed, both of them proposed, that is Vincent Ostrom as well as Elinor Ostrom. So, the modification are the fourfold. The first one is replacement of the term rivalry of consumptions with the subtractability of use. So, if you see the categorizations or the terminologies developed by R. A. Musgraves, that is non-excludability and non-rivalry. But however, in this modification of the goods, in defining this club goods, Elinor Ostrom as well as Vincent Ostrom, they talk about some changes, that instead of using this rivalry of consumption, we can use this subtractability of the use of that particular resource. So, this is their contributions in the classification of the goods itself. The second contribution in this classification of the goods by this couple is that instead of talking about the mere presence and absence of this particular attributes, that is whether the excludability characteristics is present in the particular good, or the subtractability of use, or you can say rivalry or non-rivalry attribute is present or absent in a particular good, we can say we can actually have a level, have a scale, that instead of saying mere presence, we can actually level their presence, that what is the, to what extent this particular level of attribute is present in that good. That is, we can categorize and level them from low to high, which can be assigned to that particular good. So, this is the second modifications and suggestions both of the authors they have talked about. And the third one is they wanted to add the fourth type of good, which is known as the common pool resources. When you talk about the typology of the goods, for the first time we talked about these three kinds of goods. One is private, public, and the third one is the club. So, this is the fourth, in addition to all these, this is the fourth categorization of the good they suggested for the categorization and the classification of the goods. So, if you see this common pool resources, obviously it is having its two types of attributes. One is subtractability in use, and the second one is difficulty in its exclusion. So, difficulty in exclusion is the same as non-excludability, and the subtractability in use is the same as the rivalry. So, and the last one that was also suggested by both the authors in the classifications of the goods is changing the name of the club good to toll good. Why they want to change the name of the good? Because the attributes are same, whatever it was suggested by Buchanan. So, only we are replacing this rivalry of consumptions with subtractability of use. But why then we need to change the nomenclature or name of the good itself from the club good to toll good? Because this facility is provided by very small units, organizations, maybe private, maybe government sometime. So, when this kind of facilities is provided by the government, let us talk about or some small governmental organizations, then let us talk about the case of the toll tax. And the second one is, let us talk about some society, let us say a cultural assigned society like your Tamil society or your Bengali society. So, if you are member of this particular society based on a cultural heritage, then there is a facility that you can actually access to this first benefit or second benefit. So, in this case the non-members who are, let us say they are not belonging to the Tamil society or the Bengali society. So, someone is from Maharashtra or some Gujarati, then obviously he or she will not having any memberships to this society, and as a result she or he will not get any benefit out of this society. So, this is the example that how this kind of toll can actually be provided by a public group or the governmental organizations, small organizations, or a private group or private organizations as well. So, in this context we will be discussing about the issues of these typologies of the goods. So, generally we are talking about these issues and problems are because of these two attributes itself. So, let us talk about, in addition to these two attributes, that is excludability and rivalryness. So, the other problems of this classification of goods, let us talk about the public good itself. So, these issues are the market failure cases or the externalities cases, and the third may be due to the lack of well defined property rights. So, in this context you will be just wondering about what all these problems are or how these issues are actually related to the classification of the goods, and the first classification of the goods is our public good. So, if you want to actually analyze all these concepts, then we need to define it, then we will be saying whether these are the problems that we are finding in this classification of the goods as well. So, let us talk about the first concept, that is market failure. So, what is market failure? That means the very word actually says that market fails, right. So, what does it mean market fails? So, generally in economics we are saying that market can function when there is two functions or the two forces present in for that particular good. or for that particular service. So, that means the demand and supply concepts are necessarily related to the market situations which actually establishes the price systems. But here when you are saying market fails, that means these mechanisms, that is supply and demand, they are not functioning in a free manner, or they actually we cannot actually define this demand and supply functions. So, that is why the market fails, because we cannot actually find any price systems in this context. So, just to define it, this market situation, this market failure is a situation when market just fails. To what? To provide some efficient distribution of goods and services in the free market. And if you want to see the second concept, what is the definition of the second concept? That is externality. The externalities means when the action of one person's benefits or costs another person who is not at all related in this transactions or action of the first person, then this thing can be termed as externalities. That means, if my action is affecting you, but you are not related to my work in any manner, then obviously it is a case of externality. So, externalities may be positively benefiting or negatively affecting you. So, externality can work in both the ways, positively or negatively. Accordingly, it will be known as positive externality or negative externality. Then the third one that we wanted to discuss, that what are the issues related to this public goods, is the well defined property rights. So, apart from these two attributes which we are saying because of which the market fails, that is the two criteria, non-excludability and non-rivalry, this well defined property rights is also responsible for failing the market, or it can actually bring the market failure as well. So, what are the very features of the property right that we are saying, and because of which we are facing the cases of market failure in the public good itself? So, the very features would be the exclusivity, that means no externalities would be present. Whatever the benefits or whatever the cost you are accruing, so it must be included in your production function itself. It should not affect the second one, either in production nor in neither in production nor in consumption as well. And the second one is enforceability. So, what is the meaning of this enforceability? So, obviously, this is the second features of the property right, well defined property right. So, there we are assuming that if you do have well defined property right, then obviously, if you are owning this property and you do have property right, that means the second cannot encroach. So, the legality is there and you can secure your property. So, you can actually protect your property because there would not be any kind of encroachment by the second person on your property itself. And the third features of this property right is the transferability. So, what is transferability here? So, that means if I am owning a property or a good and I do have property right, so that means if I want in my necessity, out of my choice, then I can actually transfer to you. I can actually sell you, gift you, right? And this is how you can say that, and there would be no problem in transferring the ownership from my ownership to your ownership. And another characteristic of this property right is comprehensibility. So, that means the property rights should be owned either privately or collectively. So, if it is privately, then obviously it is you who is having ownership, and if it is collectively, then a group of persons or a communal person or a community, they are having this ownership. No one is having ownership individually, but yes, a society or a particular group, they do have ownership rights of that. And in some of the literature, we can also find another characteristic of the property right. So, it is universality. So, that means whatever the characteristics that we have discussed under this property right, it should be universally acceptable. Everyone should accept this, that yes, it should not have any negative externalities or positive externalities, and if I am having this ownership, then obviously no one would be allowed to encroach it, and it will be, I can also easily transfer to you if I wish. and the property right would be owned either privately or collectively. So, these are the characteristics which are accepted by everyone. So, this is a kind of universal acceptability of these characteristics. So, apart from all these that we are discussing about these issues in these classifications of the goods or the very nature of the goods that we have classified, based on these we can actually talk about that why the first case is occurring, that is the case of market failure in case of the public goods. Why market fails? We have just talked about that the demand and supply functions will not be well defined, and that is why it is leading to the case of market failure. But what kind of problem we are actually facing? So, it is a supply side problem, not a demand side problem. Why it is not a demand side problem? Because when the public goods would be provided by the public authority or the government, then everyone would be interested to consume, and if someone is not interested even, he can consume, it will be freely available to him. So, it is not a demand side issue. However, it is a supply side issue. Why it is supply side issue? Because no private person would be interested to produce this public good, because it will not be getting, or the person would not be getting any profit out of this provision of the public goods. Again, why? Because here the marginal cost of producing this good is 0. If the public good is provided to you, then this say, and if some other person wants to consume the same thing, then it can be provided to the third person or the second person without any additional cost, right. So, that is what you can say, if the marginal cost is 0, then here it is leading to the case of no profit, and if it is no profit case, then obviously the private person, they will not be interested to provide the good, and because of which we are facing a supply side constraint or supply side problem in providing the public good. So, this will be leading to the case of market failure. So, after understanding this recapitulation as well as some of the additions to the typology of the goods and some of the problems, let us discuss about the first theory in the collective actions, that given all these attributes of these goods, given the classification of the goods, we are getting some problems, right. Then what are the seminal ideas, or what are the seminal theories that are already existing, which talks about the very nature of this collective action problems and how they can be actually solved. So, the first theory, that is the tragedy of the commons, which is narrated by Garrett James Hardin in 1968. And if you see the biography of Garrett Hardin, so he is an American ecologist as well as philosopher. And if you go through the original article, that is the tragedy of the commons, so whole of the article is revolving around the problem of overpopulation, which he is saying that it is a case of population explosion. And then after knowing that it is a case of overpopulation or population explosion, he is explaining, then he tries to find out what are the solutions to this overpopulation or population explosion. However, he is not finding any solution to this overpopulations. So, firstly he is saying that there is no technological solution to this problem. So, why is saying that he is assuming that there is no technical solution to this problem? Because he has taken the articles of Wisner and work, which they have published in 1964 regarding the dilemma of military power and national security. So, it was on the nuclear power and the national security. So, there they try to find out that there is a dilemma between these two between these two words. The first one is the military power and the second one is national security. So, that means when the military power is increasing steadily, then what will be happening to the national security of that particular country? So, it will be steadily decreasing. Why again? So, when you are saying, suppose say our country is actually increasing the military power, so that means it does not necessarily lead to the increasing national security rather than decreasing national security, because the enemy countries, they would be also increasing their military power. So, as a result, the very security of the country is getting threatened, not getting secured. So, that is why they have found this dilemma that there is no technical solution to this problem, because when you are possessing your technology or you are actually bringing new technologies and new innovations in your military power, and you are thinking that you are actually increasing the strength of the military power, as a result the national security will be increasing, but the same thing can also be followed by your enemy country. So, that is why instead of saying that your national security is increasing, it actually happens that the national security is decreasing. That is why for this problem of the military power and national security, both the authors, they talked that there is no technical solution to this problem. So, just like this example, Hadin also thought that there is no technical solution to the problem of population explosion. Again, why? So, in his article, by taking into account, by explaining different examples, he actually posed and probed that how there is no technical solution to this population explosion. So, first of all, he tried to probe and tried to explain the theories or the very approaches of three learned people who worked on the population itself, or who talked about population explosion itself. The first one is Thomas Robert Malthus, the second one is Jeremy Bentham, and the third one is Adam Smith. So, how their theories or how their perceptions and the assumptions is applicable to this, and how their ideas are taken into account in explaining this population explosion by Garrett Harind. So, let us talk about this. So, the first one is, this is the Malthusian problem of population explosion. So, what he actually preached about during his writing, that population naturally tends to grow geometrically, or we are saying exponential growth of population is there, he preached about. And the second thing is that when the population is increasing exponentially, what is happening to the supply of food? The supply of food is also increasing, but it is arithmetically. So, obviously, they cannot balance. When something is increasing geometrically, it cannot balance when some other thing is actually increasing arithmetically. So, this is the problem, that what is the repercussions of the population explosion. So, that is why he talked about this metaphor of commons. So, as a result or as a consequence, he talked about that when population explosion is there, when the growth of the population is geometrically increasing and the food supply is arithmetically increasing. So, as a result, the per capita share or per capita availability of world's resources, they must be decreasing, steadily decreasing, because again we know that we do have a finite world, and in a finite world obviously the production or the supply of food cannot be infinite, because we are saying the population is exploding. That means we are trying to say that population would be growing infinitely. So, if the population would be growing infinitely and we cannot actually produce the supply of food, or we cannot actually produce the food in infinite manner, because we are assuming that, or we do have this finite world. So, what is the solutions? Because this is the problem we are facing, then what would be the solution? So, is it the technology that can solve the problem, or we can say who else can able to solve this problem? And what is the constant here? The constant here is, we are actually talking about a finite world, and a finite world can only support a finite population. So, what would the conclusion out of this scenario that we have narrated? That the population growth must eventually equal to 0, otherwise we will be facing this problem, or the problem is not actually going to be solved. So, this is what in brief Malthus has talked about in his theory. But however, in practical world, if you see these scenarios across the countries and nations and continents, this scenario is not found. what is the scenario we are not actually realizing? That population is increasing and the food supply is not increasing at that level, and we do have a finite world. Therefore, the assumptions or conclusions that Malthus talked about, that population growth must eventually equal 0, this is not realized. So, this is the first thing Hardin talked about related to the commons, that is here he talked about the commons as the case of the population explosion. Then he talked about the second ideas by which was talked about by Jeremy Bentham. So, what is his ideas or what is his assumptions he talked about? He is known for his utility maximization or which is known as utilitarian concept. That means, according to him or according to the schools of thought, those who are believing this utilitarianism, they are saying the maximum benefits must be achieved. So, in this word he can say that the greatest good for the greatest number, how to achieve it? These are the two things. The first one is the greatest good and the second one is greatest number. So, in this context, if the population growth is 0, what would happen to his assumptions of this maximization of benefits for the greatest good for the greatest number, right? And then if you see these sentences, that is how to achieve this greatest good for the greatest number, then we are actually finding two obstacles in achieving the greatest good for the greatest numbers. So, what are the obstacles? The first one is that this is not feasible because of these reasons. One is mathematical reasons and the second one is your biological reason. So, what is the mathematical reason behind this? That you cannot actually maximize the greatest good for the greatest number. If you see mathematical, then we can say that it is not possible to maximize for two or more variables at the same time. We can take the examples of partial differential equation, or we can talk about the game theory. So, if you are taking into account these two examples, then we are finding that obviously in mathematics we cannot actually maximize two or more variables at the same time, at the same point of time. And that is why we cannot actually achieve this maximization of the greatest good for the greatest number, because these are two variables and we cannot actually maximize both. And the second reason is the biological facts. So, what is the biological facts? When you are saying it is the greatest good and we are trying to maximize the benefits out of it, so what is the maximum good per person? Is it defined? What is the maximum number per person? And if it is defined that this would be like 100 number of goods per person, but which kind of goods, right? Then what type of goods, because nature of goods are different and accordingly which type of goods one is requiring is different. Then how to say that, how to maximize the good per person? So, just for example we can take that for a person or a particular person is interested in two goods here. Let us say one is estuaries with the factory lands, right? But if you are trying to say that the person is maximizing this amount of estuaries with the he also want to maximize the factory lands, then it is two goods, one is estuaries and the second one is factory lands. They do have different attributes. The nature of these goods, or if you believe in this classification of the goods, then you can assign to the attributes, then you will be finding they are totally different goods. Then how can you maximize it? Because they are measured in different units or they do have different characteristics. So, this is the second reason because of which we cannot actually achieve the greatest good for the greatest number. And the third logic or the third idea Hardin had taken from Adam Smith. So, again what is the assumption of Adam Smith, or how he has put forth his assumption that decisions reached individually will in fact be the best decision for an entire society. So, whatever the decision a particular individual takes, that is the best decision for the society itself, and that is why the societal benefits would be maximized. That is what he assumed. But again, is it the fact that if you are maximizing your benefits by taking a particular decision, whether it will be leading to maximize societal benefits as well? Then again, if this assumption is correct, then this non-intervention of the government, that is laissez-faire in the reproduction system itself, here population explosion we are talking about, this can be continued, and we can assume that when human being will control their fertility to produce the optimum population. Because here what is the assumption? That decisions reached individually will be leading to the best decision for the society. That means a single individual, he knows what would be the optimum level of population itself. But if it is the case, then the case of population explosion would not have arrived. But however, if you see these are not the realistic terms, and we are actually in a real world facing some different scenarios regarding this population explosion, and this may be termed as the tragedy of the freedom in the commons to reproduce. So, what is the tragedy here? The tragedy of the freedom. Every individual is having the freedom to take his own decisions, and again it is assumed that these decisions are the best decisions for the society itself, and that is why it is leading to the tragedy in the commons itself in terms of population explosion. So, in this lecture we discussed how Hardin defined the problem of population growth or population explosion, and in the next lecture we will be continuing with this same topic to discuss how Hardin has taken the metaphor of commons in order to explain the population growth problem as well as the pollution problem. So, that is what we will be discussing in the next lecture. Thank you.